Tonight, Donald Trump's own worst enemy may have returned. The GOP nominee touting his support for stop and frisk. Plus, is the media giving Trump a pass as we approach the first debate? Lots to explain from the campaign trail. And then Andrew Cuomo's per Coco, the man once known as Cuomo's right-hand man, arrested and charged with corruption. So the question is, what could this mean for the governor? And later, with protests turning violent in Charlotte and more questions than answers following police shootings of a black man in Tulsa, we look back on the incident that cost Amadou Diallo his life outside a Bronx apartment 17 years ago. Diallo's mother sits down with Dominic and tells us she has found peace. But the question is, can the rest of the nation do the same? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you very much for joining us this Thursday night. Now, we begin tonight with a race for the White House. That's where we are now, just 46 days away from Election Day, and early voting, believe it or not, has already begun in parts of the country. Now, as for the remaining undecided voters, well, they only have to wait another 4 days for the next landmark moment in this tumultuous race. That's going to be the first presidential debate, and it's going to be in our neck of the woods out on Long Island at Hofstra University. So the question is, where does the race stand tonight? And for that, let's bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, with the numbers. Andrew?
Well, Rich, there's good news for both candidates in the polling, but the basic takeaway tonight is that Hillary Clinton seems to have reversed the trend that saw the presidential race tighten over the past couple of weeks. But make no mistake, this is still a very tight race. Poll averages giving Clinton just over a 1-point lead in a four-way race. But the headline poll of the day is from NBC and the Wall Street Journal, and it shows Clinton's lead now expanding after a couple of weeks of contraction. They have her up 6 in a four-way race among likely voters nationwide. And Clinton remains the frontrunner in the 538 election forecast, though she's at just a 57% chance of winning, and that is her lowest odds during the general election campaign thus far. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. From the numbers to the headlines here, where Donald Trump once again may have played to his base, and he could have sacrificed a few votes in the process doing it. Now, he continued to focus on crime, and obviously a major headline nationally, as we'll talk about in the program, and he's also talked about it with his own proposal.
What would you do to help stop that violence, black on black crime?
Right. I would do stop and frisk. I think you have to.
Now, Trump tried to walk it back this morning, saying, he only meant Chicago would be where he'd apply a tactic that obviously we've talked about at length here in New York about. Other potential problems for Trump clinging to stop and frisk. First, it's incredibly unpopular with blacks, and his support could boost black turnout for Hillary Clinton, which she desperately needs, and frankly, there's been some concerns as to whether or not she'll get. Second, it's unconstitutional, or so says the federal judge who overturned the policy in New York City. And if it is unconstitutional in New York, well, that means it's unconstitutional everywhere. And third, there is no concrete proof that the program actually works. Sure, it's got its supporters and certainly its opponents. Yes, crime dropped in the city while it was used, but crime also has fell after the city cut back on that very program, as the numbers have indicated. So let's get some analysis, and for that, let's bring in our panel tonight. Bill Aronwald, he's a defense attorney, former assistant U.S. attorney. We'll talk about that with Mr. Percoco coming shortly. Dominic Carter, the man who sat down with Ms. Diallo, fascinating conversation himself. Scott Vanderhoff, former 5-term Republican Rockland County exec and also co-chair of the Palisades Institute at Dominican College. And Andrew Whitman, who you already met, our senior political correspondent. Dom, we've talked before that there's been a issue, not when you look at the different constituencies in these countries, African Americans. I know Trump, within black voters, he's polling in single digits right now, right where basically Mitt Romney was before. But it was more blacks that have been motivated in the last 2 election cycles to turn out and vote for Barack Obama in large numbers. They didn't feel the same passion, certainly for Hillary Clinton, but a lot of people feel Trump may be doing his best to create that passion, even if she can't do it herself, to get these folks to the polls.
Well, if you're referring to stop and frisk, I believe that's. I think certainly most people in the black community would agree with the assessment that was made by Mayor de Blasio. It is divisive. It is extremely divisive. There's no evidence that it works. 87% black stopped. Only 12% legitimate where police found something, and in the meantime you're antagonizing almost a third to a half of the city. It's just not smart politics. Look what's happening in terms of North Carolina and other places. If you think it's bad now, imagine what will happen if the country institute Mr. Trump's plan.
You know, Bill, speaking of Trump and some troubles, I spoke to our buddies last night at the legal panel about some simultaneous legal issues for him. One certainly related to Trump U and the Attorney General in New York looking at that. But then the secondary issue with the Washington Post investigation here about the charities and basically self-dealing. Is your take that either one of these, it's not just a bad political headline, there could be a problem here? I mean, you and I are golfers, right? The idea that a guy goes to your tournament, makes a hole-in-one where you're supposed to get $1 million and he says, no, it doesn't count. I moved the flag, I moved the tees up basically, so it doesn't count. Then agrees to say, okay, I'm not going to give you $1 million, but we'll settle. Pay $150 grand to my favorite charity. Then he takes it out of his own charity where he didn't put any money in to go pay it off. It feels skeevy, but it's also illegal, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Look, the fact of the matter is that if the federal prosecutor or even a local prosecutor decided to investigate Trump University, there are allegations there that basically what Trump did was he misrepresented. First of all, there's a judgment entered against him already for having misrepresented that it was a university when it had never been accredited in New York State. Yep. But if somebody really wanted to take a look at it, you can make out an argument here for a case charging him with fraud, grand larceny by false pretenses, because he was getting $30,000 a pop from a number of people based upon misrepresentations as to what they would get for their money. With respect to the charities, my understanding is that money that is donated for the charities cannot be used by the charity to pay personal expenses of somebody, whether it be the foundation's chairman or whatever it is. In this case, if the allegations are true, I think Trump could face some serious charges.
I mentioned, Scott, the timeline here. The next big event we're going to have is the debate, certainly Monday night in Hofstra. And with 3 presidential debates and a VP one, many people think, sure, there's been so many unforced errors in this campaign from both of the candidates, certainly from the guy on our screen. What would you counsel? I mean, the argument has been, as long as he stands on the same stage with her and doesn't fall down and doesn't embarrass himself, he wins because he basically puts himself on equal footing, which will be the first time that he can say that, the first time they're sharing a stage tonight. Would you counsel him to be himself, or would you counsel him to try to stick to specific talking points and not go extemp?
The latter. I mean, because when he's himself, he shoots from the hip, and when he does that, he finds himself in trouble, and that'll make all the news, and usually bad for him. But if he sticks to the script, and by the way, he's now going to go in and apparently do some trial runs on this so he can try to do that script.
But his campaign also said, you're absolutely right, that for the first time he begrudgingly is going to do some debate prep, but they said the Trump you'll hear on the stage Monday night in Hofstra will be the same Trump you heard. He's going to speak, he's going to be himself, and he's not going to be coached.
And he may do that, but the risk there is great, because if she gets under his skin, which others have done in any way, and he reacts to it, first of all, the whole male-female thing comes out, he's picking on her and that kind of thing. Although she has a lot to lose here, too. I mean, she's got to stick by positions. She can't get riled. And so it actually, as you point out, this debate becomes very, very important for both candidates.
And the ratings, for whatever it's worth, are going to be astronomical. Now, Andrew, I've heard 2 competing thoughts. Just what Scott said, and apparently from the prep, that she's doing that. She's trying to find places where he's tender, where he's likely to lash out. We know something as simple as talking about his hand size has gotten, 12 news cycles out of it, right? But should she try and poke and get him to react, or should she try to be the more presidential of the 2 candidates and talk about the issues and make him basically done what he's done so many times, which is self-inflicted?
I think she should try to do both. I think she should try to come across as being the president on the stage and being above his level, but at the same time throw a few shots across his bow and see if he'll take the bait. I mean, I think if she overly prepares one way or the other, she runs the risk of him not rising to the occasion for either one. She tries to taunt him into losing his composure and he doesn't, well then all of a sudden she looks bad for being offensive. Whereas if she rolls around in the gutter too much with him, she runs the risk of making herself look unpresidential and harming herself in the process. But, back to what we're talking about with some of the Trump University and the Trump Foundation, that stuff doesn't seem to stick to him. People seem to have separated that from the Trump, the candidate. The stop and frisk one, I don't understand, because it doesn't seem like it's going to gain him any new voters beyond the base that he already has, but it runs the risk of decidedly potentially losing voters along the way, the undecided folks in the middle who see things that are happening in North Carolina or in Tulsa and say, I don't think more police and African-American interaction is the answer to solving these
At the risk
problems.
of going on the couch with Trump, I think I got an idea after more than a year and certainly a lifetime of seeing what he's done. He looks in the context only of New York City. And I'm not even talking all the outer boroughs. He looks at it pretty much from New York and Manhattan, a little bit of Queens here, and he says, okay, what do I know? Because he never wants to say, I don't know, or I'll have to look into it. He's going to give an answer. And the one thing he knows about policing things is stop and frisk. So whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, he answered the question. I think that's what's going to make Monday a fascinating debate.
The biggest concern for Hillary Clinton so far has been trying to get black turnout. She's got 95% of the black vote.
He did her a favor today.
He's just pumped up
Definitely.
black turnout for Hillary Clinton.
Now, earlier we mentioned the debate coming up on Monday, and this reminder, we will have live coverage of the first presidential debate. It begins at 9, but we'll come on at 8:30 on Fox 1 News. We'll have team coverage live from the event in Hofstra, and also have a panel of folks discussing what we expect to hear. And then immediately after, we'll have reaction after we bring you in its entirety that first and critical debate. All right, coming up next. Next chapter in Albany corruption. There are many chapters in that, aren't they? Well, it may have been written this morning, and now the focus is on the governor's office and a longtime aide known as the third Cuomo son. What could this mean for the governor? Well, we'll get into that right after this.